The Galactic Combat Academy floated in the void between three stars, its massive ring structure spinning slowly to generate artificial gravity. Commander Zexthu watched through the observation deck as another batch of new recruits arrived via transport pods. His 4 eyes tracked each species as they disembarked: the towering Krillian warriors with their chitinous armor, the swift Veltar scouts with their enhanced reflexes, the methodical Thane engineers with their calculating minds. Then he saw her. The human walked differently than the others. Where the Krillians stomped with purpose and the Veltar darted with nervous energy, she moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost lazy. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple knot, and her dark eyes took in everything around her with what appeared to be casual interest. According to her file, her name was Sarah Chen, age 24, from the 3rd planet of a small system called Sol. Sir. His aide, a young Veltar named Kixra, chittered nervously beside him. The human's preliminary scores are unusual. Zexthu's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Elaborate. Her physical capabilities test as average across all metrics. Strength, speed, agility, all perfectly unremarkable. Her cognitive assessments show standard pattern recognition and tactical thinking. Nothing suggests she should be here among the elite. The commander's compound eyes focused on the human again. She had stopped to help a struggling Thane with their equipment bag. Despite the weight being nearly twice what a human should be able to lift comfortably, yet she managed it with apparent ease. Yet here she is, Zexthu murmured. The Council doesn't make mistakes in selection. The Academy trained the galaxy's finest warriors, strategists, and protectors. Only 1 in 10 million beings across thousands of worlds ever received an invitation. The selection process remained a mystery even to the instructors. Guided by an ancient artificial intelligence known simply as the System. For 3,000 years, it had identified potential with uncanny accuracy. Sarah Chen reached the registration desk and submitted her credentials to the automated scanner. The holographic display flickered, showing her species designation: Human, Terra, Sol 3. Status: Newcomer species, 1st generation. That explained the confusion. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Most species took centuries to produce Academy-worthy candidates. Yet here stood their first representative. Instructor Klaroon approached the observation deck, his massive Krillian frame casting shadows across the floor. As the Academy's chief combat trainer, he had broken more recruits than any other instructor in the past century. Commander, I've reviewed the human's file. Permission to treat her as standard protocol? Zexthu considered this. Standard protocol for Klaroon meant brutal, uncompromising training designed to push students beyond their apparent limitations. Many species required such harsh methods to reach their potential. Others, particularly newer spacefaring races, often couldn't handle the intensity. Approved. But monitor closely. The Council's interest in this species suggests there's more than meets the eye. Down in the orientation hall, Sarah found herself assigned to Training Pod Epsilon with 11 other recruits. The diversity was staggering. Beings of crystalline structure, gaseous entities contained in mechanical suits, creatures of pure energy crackling with bioelectricity. She was definitely the most ordinary-looking individual in the group. A holographic instructor materialized before them, its form shifting between various species templates as it spoke. Welcome to the Galactic Combat Academy. You are here because the system has identified exceptional potential within you. Over the next 6 months, you will be tested, trained, and transformed. Many of you will fail. Some may die. Those who succeed will become guardians of galactic peace. Sarah raised her hand. What exactly does the system look for in potential recruits? The hologram paused, its form stabilizing into a neutral humanoid shape. An excellent question from our human representative. The system evaluates trillions of variables: genetic markers, behavioral patterns, cognitive flexibility, emotional resilience, and factors we don't fully understand ourselves. What we do know is that it has never been wrong. A Krillian recruit nearby, easily 8 feet tall and armored in natural chitin, let out a dismissive click. What exceptional potential could such a soft, small creature possibly possess? The hologram's attention shifted. Warrior Thexka, would you care to demonstrate your species' renowned combat prowess against our human colleague? Sarah felt every eye in the room turn toward her. The Krillian's mandibles spread in what might have been a smile, revealing rows of serrated teeth. Gladly. Though I will be gentle with the fragile newcomer. This will be a simple reflex test, the hologram announced. No actual combat. Thexka will attempt to tag Chen with a practice weapon. Chen must simply avoid being struck. Duration: 30 seconds. The practice weapon materialized in the Krillian's massive claws, a padded baton designed to register contact without causing injury. Sarah took her position in the marked circle, looking almost comically small next to her opponent. Begin, the hologram announced. Thexka moved with surprising speed for his size, the practice weapon sweeping towards Sarah's head in a powerful arc. She wasn't there when it arrived. The human had shifted slightly, letting the weapon pass inches from her face while barely seeming to move. The Krillian followed up with a thrust toward her midsection. Again, Sarah wasn't where the weapon expected her to be. She had twisted away at precisely the right moment, the baton sliding past her body. What happened next sent whispers through the assembled recruits. Thexka launched into a complex attack sequence, a series of strikes, sweeps, and thrusts that should have been impossible for any being to avoid without superhuman speed or reflexes. Yet Sarah seemed to know where each attack was going before it began. She moved with minimal effort, always just barely ahead of the strikes. The Krillian's attacks grew more desperate, more aggressive. His natural combat instincts took over as frustration mounted. He began using techniques that weren't part of the simple tagging exercise. Grappling attempts, feints, even a spinning attack that used his full body weight. Sarah continued to avoid every strike. More than that, she seemed to be studying her opponent, her dark eyes tracking his movements with calculating precision. When Thexka attempted a particularly aggressive overhead smash, she didn't just dodge. She stepped inside his reach and gently tapped his chest with her finger. Time, the hologram called. Thexka stood frozen, his practice weapon raised above his head, breathing heavily. Sarah straightened her simple training uniform and smiled politely. Good exercise. Thank you. The silence in the room was deafening. Interesting, the hologram mused. Computer, please review the engagement data. A three-dimensional replay materialized above them, showing the fight from multiple angles. Enhanced sensors had tracked every movement, measuring reaction times down to the millisecond. The data revealed something extraordinary. Subject Chen began evasive movements, an average of 0.3 seconds before Subject Thexka initiated each attack. This suggests either precognitive abilities or unprecedented pattern recognition capabilities. Sarah frowned. I just watched how he moved. His shoulder would tense before he struck. His weight would shift before he lunged. Basic body language. The temporal analysis indicates you began moving before these tells occurred, the hologram replied. Your responses preceded even the muscular preparation for attacks. A Veltar recruit, her antenna twitching with excitement, spoke up. Could she be reading his neural patterns? Some species can detect bioelectric fields. Negative. Sensors detect no unusual electromagnetic sensitivity from the human subject. Sarah shrugged. Maybe I got lucky? But the hologram's next words changed everything. Computer, please display the system's real-time analysis of this engagement. A new data stream appeared, lines of alien text scrolling rapidly past. Most recruits couldn't read the ancient system language, but those who could understand it gasped. The Veltar recruit translated in a whisper. Subject exhibits previously unknown sensory capability. Classification: temporal combat prediction. Mechanism: unknown. Potential: extreme. Thexka lowered his practice weapon slowly. His species was known throughout the galaxy as supreme warriors, bred for combat over millions of years of evolution. Yet this small, soft creature had made him look clumsy and slow, without even trying to fight back. How? He asked simply. Sarah considered the question seriously. I don't know how to explain it. When you were about to attack, I could feel it coming, not see it exactly, but sense the intention forming, like knowing someone's about to speak before they open their mouth. The hologram flickered, processing this information. All recruits will proceed to dormitory assignments. Chen, Sarah, you will report to advanced evaluation in 1 hour. As the group dispersed, Sarah noticed the way the other recruits looked at her now. Some with curiosity, others with newfound respect, and a few with what might have been fear. She had come to the academy expecting to be the weak link, the representative of an inexperienced species trying to keep up with galactic elites. Instead, she had apparently demonstrated an ability that the most advanced sensors in known space couldn't explain. Her dormitory assignment placed her in a shared space with 3 other recruits: a Thane engineer named Morden, a Veltar scout called Zilha, and a being of crystalline structure who communicated through harmonic resonances and went by the name Song of Distant Stars. The accommodations were Spartanly functional: individual sleeping alcoves, a common area with study terminals, and a small food preparation unit. "You've certainly made an impression," Morden observed as Sarah settled into her alcove. The Thane spoke in precise, measured tones that matched their species' methodical nature. "I've never seen combat data that the system couldn't categorize." Zilha, perched on her specialized sleeping platform, chittered thoughtfully. "My people have the fastest reflexes in known space. Evolutionary necessity from our homeworld's predatory environment. Yet you moved faster than I could follow, and you're supposedly a standard gravity species." Song of Distant Stars chimed in with harmonics that the universal translator rendered as, "The crystalline archives speak of ancient warriors who could see attacks before they were thrown. We thought them legends." "I'm not ancient or legendary," Sarah protested. "I'm just me. Sarah Chen from Earth. I fix starship navigation systems for a living." "Fixed," Morden corrected. Past tense. The Academy doesn't release graduates back to their previous occupations. You'll be assigned where your abilities can serve the greater galactic community. The weight of that statement settled over Sarah. She had volunteered for the Academy program partly for adventure, partly because Earth's government had offered substantial compensation to her family for her service. She hadn't really considered that success meant leaving her old life behind forever. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Her personal communicator displayed instructions to report to Training Complex 7 for advanced evaluation. The timestamp showed she had 15 minutes. "The deep evaluation chambers," Zilha observed, reading over Sarah's shoulder. "They only use those for recruits who show exceptional promise or unusual abilities. I've heard some tests there can be intense." Sarah gathered her things and headed for the door. "Wish me luck. Humans believe in luck?" Song of Distant Stars chimed curiously. "Sometimes that's all we have." Training Complex 7 occupied an entire sector of the Academy's outer ring. As Sarah approached, she passed through increasingly sophisticated security checkpoints, biometric scanners, neural activity monitors, even what appeared to be a quantum resonance detector that hummed ominously as she walked through it. The evaluation chamber itself was a sphere roughly 30 meters in diameter, its interior surfaces covered in sensor arrays and holographic projectors. Instructor Clarun waited inside, his massive Krillian frame somehow making the large space feel cramped. "Human Chen," he rumbled in acknowledgement. "Today we discover whether your earlier performance was genuine ability or fortunate accident. What exactly will you be testing?" "Everything. The chamber's systems activated around them. The system has classified you as a potentially crucial asset. My job is to understand your capabilities and limitations before you encounter real danger." The first test was straightforward. A series of increasingly complex combat scenarios played out by holographic opponents. Sarah faced simulated versions of various galactic species, each using their unique fighting styles and natural advantages. The engagement parameters were simple: survive and adapt. What emerged was remarkable. Sarah's apparent ability to predict attacks held true across different opponent types and fighting styles. Whether facing a lightning-fast Veltar or a massively strong Gulkhan heavyweight, She moved with the same uncanny timing that let her avoid damage while studying her opponent's patterns. But more interesting was how she adapted her responses. Against agile opponents, she used their momentum against them. Against strong opponents, she targeted joints and pressure points with surprising precision for someone with no formal combat training. Against multiple opponents, she positioned herself so they interfered with each other. Computer, Klaroon called after the 10th scenario. Analysis of subject's combat development. Subject Chen demonstrates accelerated learning capabilities. Combat effectiveness has improved by 347% over the past hour. Learning curve suggests continued rapid development. The Krillian instructor's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Run scenario Omicron 7. Sarah noticed his tone had changed. Whatever came next was serious. The chamber transformed into what appeared to be a war zone. Ruined buildings, smoke, debris scattered everywhere. Multiple hostile contacts appeared simultaneously, armed with energy weapons instead of practice batons. The safety protocols were still active, but this was as close to real combat as the Academy could simulate. Survive for 5 minutes, Klaroon instructed. Use any means necessary. The attack began immediately. Energy bolts filled the air as Sarah dove for cover behind a rubble pile. Her mind raced, processing the tactical situation. 6 opponents, positioned to create crossfire zones. Cover was limited and decreasing as their weapons chewed through her hiding spots. She closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on that strange sense that had helped her dodge Thexka's attacks. The feeling expanded, becoming something more than simple combat prediction. She could sense the intentions of her opponents, feel the flow of the battle like a 3-dimensional map in her mind. When she moved, it was with purpose. She sprinted from cover, just as the enemy fighters adjusted their positions to flank her previous location. A leap carried her over a low wall seconds before energy fire swept through where she had been. She grabbed a piece of debris and threw it with precise timing to strike one opponent's weapon just as he fired, causing his shot to hit another enemy fighter instead. The simulation's AI adapted, making the opponents smarter and more coordinated. But Sarah adapted faster. She began using the environment more creatively, causing structural collapses to block firing lines, using reflective surfaces to redirect energy blasts, even timing her movements to the rhythm of the opponent's weapons recharge cycles. When the 5 minutes ended, 3 simulated enemies were down, 2 had retreated to defensive positions, and 1 had actually switched sides after Sarah somehow convinced the AI that its character's motivations had been compromised by her tactical brilliance. Klaroon stood in silence for a long moment after the chamber returned to its neutral state. In 30 years of instruction, he finally said, I have never seen a recruit achieve that level of tactical awareness in their first day. Most species require months of training to develop even basic battlefield intuition. I don't understand it myself, Sarah admitted. It felt like I could see the whole fight happening before it actually did. Not just the next attack, but the flow of the entire engagement. Computer, prepare a full report for Commander Zexthu. Priority classification. As they left the evaluation chamber, Klaroon walked beside her instead of leading. For a warrior culture that prized strength and dominance, this was a significant gesture of respect. Human Chen, may I ask you a personal question? Of course, instructor. What was your world like? Earth, was it called? Sarah smiled, thinking of home. Complicated. Beautiful in places, dangerous in others. We've spent most of our history fighting each other over resources, territory, ideology. Only recently did we start working together toward common goals. Ah! Klaroon's mandibles clicked in what might have been understanding. A crucible species. That explains much. Crucible species? Worlds where survival requires constant adaptation, where conflict drives rapid evolution of tactics and strategy. Such planets occasionally produce individuals with exceptional combat intuition, but yours may be the first to develop what you displayed today. They had reached the dormitory level. As Sarah prepared to return to her quarters, Klaroon delivered one final observation that would keep her awake long into the station's night cycle. The system brought you here for a reason, Human Chen. In my experience, that reason usually involves a crisis the rest of us haven't seen coming yet. I suggest you prepare accordingly." Quote, Sarah watched the massive instructor disappear down the corridor, his words echoing in her mind. She had come to the academy thinking she was just another recruit from a new species trying to prove humanity belonged among the galactic community. Now she was beginning to understand that her presence here might be connected to something much larger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The alarm that woke Sarah 3 hours before the scheduled start of training cycle was not the gentle chime used for normal wake-up calls. This was a deep, resonating tone that seemed to vibrate through the station's superstructure itself. The emergency alert reserved for actual threats to Academy security. She rolled out of her sleeping alcove to find her roommates already gathering around the common area's main display terminal. The screen showed tactical information streaming in real time. An unidentified vessel had emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Academy's sensor range and was approaching at maximum sublight velocity. "Unknown configuration," Morden reported, his methodical voice carrying an edge of concern. "The computer can't match it to any known species technology." Zilha's antennae twitched nervously. "My people's archives contain records of over 40,000 distinct starship designs. If this isn't in our databases." Song of Distant Stars chimed with harmonics that conveyed deep unease. "The crystalline collective has observed the galaxy for eons. We know all who sail the void." Sarah studied the tactical display more carefully. The approaching vessel was massive, easily the size of a dreadnought-class warship, but its configuration defied conventional design principles. Instead of the clean lines and geometric efficiency that marked advanced spacefaring civilizations, this ship appeared almost organic. Its hull curved and twisted like something grown rather than built. "Academy control to all personnel," came the announcement over the station's communication system. "Condition yellow. All training exercises are suspended. Recruits report to designated safe zones immediately." The safe zone for their sector was a reinforced compartment deep within the Academy's core structure. As they made their way through corridors filled with hurrying students and instructors, Sarah noticed something that made her stop walking. The feeling was back, that strange sense of impending action that had helped her dodge attacks during the combat evaluations. But this time, it wasn't focused on an individual opponent. The sensation was vast, diffuse, like standing in the path of an approaching storm. "Sarah?" Zilha had noticed her pause. "What's wrong?" "Wah. Hey, I don't know. Something's coming, something big." Before anyone could ask her to elaborate, the station's lights flickered and dimmed. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in the red glow of crisis lighting. Through the transparent aluminum windows lining the corridor, they could see the Academy's defensive systems activating, energy shields shimmering into existence around the station's critical sections, weapon turrets emerging from concealed positions. Then they saw the ship. It dominated the viewport, so close now that its details were clearly visible. The organic appearance was even more pronounced at this range. The hull seemed to pulse with internal light, and what had looked like design features from a distance resolved into something far more disturbing. The ship appeared to be covered in what looked like scales or plates that shifted and moved independently. By the crystalline depths, Song of Distant Stars chimed in harmonics that bypassed the translator entirely, conveying raw terror. "That is not a ship. That is a living thing." The creature vessel came to a stop just outside the Academy's weapons range. For several minutes, nothing happened. No communication attempts were made, no hostile actions taken. It simply hung in space, its hull pulsing with slow, rhythmic light. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to extend that strange predictive sense outward, toward the alien presence. What she felt made her blood run cold. Hunger. Ancient, patient, implacable hunger. "We need to get to the safe zone," she said urgently. Now, they were still 50 meters from the designated shelter when the attack began. Not with weapons or explosions, but with something far more insidious. The lights throughout the Academy began to fail, section by section, as something drained the station's power systems. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, sealing corridors and trapping students and staff in isolated compartments. Sarah felt the attack coming a split second before it happened. Not a physical assault, but something reaching out through the Academy's computer networks, probing and infiltrating. The station's artificial intelligence, the same system that had identified her potential and brought her here, was under attack. The main computer core, she said, grabbing Morden's arm. They're trying to take control of the system. How could you possibly know that? The Thane engineer demanded. Sarah couldn't explain how she knew. She just did, with the same certainty that had let her predict Thexka's attacks. Because that's what I would do if I wanted to disable the Academy's defenses. The lights failed completely just as they reached an intersection of major corridors. In the darkness, lit only by emergency markers, they could hear sounds that didn't belong on a space station. Organic clicking, chittering, scraping noises that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The ventilation systems, Zilha whispered, her enhanced hearing picking up details the others missed. Something's moving through them. Sarah's mind raced. The Academy's layout was burned into her memory from her first day's orientation tour. The main computer core was 12 levels down and across the station's diameter. The most direct route would take them through areas that were probably already compromised. But there was another way. Follow me, she said, leading them away from the planned route to the safe zone. I know where we need to go. The safe zone is in the other direction, Morden protested. The safe zone won't be safe if they take control of the station's systems. We need to protect the computer core. Sarah's certainty surprised her. She had been at the Academy for less than 24 hours, yet she was making strategic decisions about protecting it from an unknown alien threat. More disturbing was the fact that her decisions felt right. Like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in her mind. They navigated through maintenance corridors that most recruits wouldn't even know existed. Sarah led them with confidence through the darkness, guided by that strange sense of spatial awareness that seemed to extend beyond normal human capabilities. As they descended toward the station's core, the sounds of infiltration grew stronger. Whatever was attacking the Academy had deployed some form of boarding party. Creatures that moved through the station's infrastructure like parasites, working their way through a host organism. Contact ahead, Zilha warned, her antennae detecting movement before the others could see anything. Sarah extended her senses forward and immediately recoiled. The presence she detected wasn't alive in any way she could recognize. It was artificial, but not mechanical. Something that existed in the space between organic and synthetic, defying classification. 3 of them, she whispered, guarding the approach to the core. I can't describe what they are. They called describe what they are. The maintenance corridor opened into a larger chamber, one of the Academy's secondary computer nodes. Emergency lighting revealed the attackers clearly for the first time. They were roughly humanoid in shape but wrong in every detail. Their skin was a matte black that seemed to absorb light, and their movements were too fluid, too precise to be natural. When they turned toward the new arrivals, their faces showed features that belonged to no known species. Features that seemed to shift and change as they moved. Shapeshifters, Morden breathed. But the bioscanners should have detected them. They're not reading as biological, Sarah realized. They're some kind of hybrid, part machine, part something else. The creatures moved to attack with coordinated precision that spoke of hive mind intelligence. But Sarah was already in motion. Guided by that predictive sense that had become her most reliable asset, she dove left, just as the lead creature's arm extended into something resembling a blade. The weapon sliced through the air where she had been standing, leaving a trail of disrupted space-time that made the air itself seem to scream. Dimensional weapons, song of distant stars chimed in terror. They cut through space itself. Sarah rolled behind a computer console and tried to think. 3 opponents with weapons that could cut through anything, in a confined space with limited cover. Her roommates were brave but untrained in combat. In a straight fight, they would all die in seconds. But this didn't have to be a straight fight. Morden, she called out, while dodging another spatial blade strike. Can you overload one of these computer nodes? Theoretically, yes. But the feedback could damage the entire network. Do it. Zilha, I need you to create a distraction. Song, can your people project holographic illusions? Limited harmonic resonance can affect light patterns, came the chimed reply. Good enough. On my mark, everyone moves. Sarah stood up from cover, drawing the attention of all three attackers. For a moment she stood perfectly still, letting them focus on her as their primary target. She could feel their intentions like physical pressure, could sense the exact trajectory of their coming attacks. Now, Morden triggered the overload just as Zilha launched herself across the chamber, in a complex, evasive pattern designed to confuse targeting systems. Song of Distant Stars created a cascade of harmonic frequencies that turned the air itself into a prism, fracturing light into confusing patterns. Sarah moved through the chaos like she was dancing to music only she could hear. The creature's attacks came exactly where she expected them, and she was never where they expected her to be. More than avoiding their strikes, she began to anticipate their positioning, leading them into each other's attack patterns. The overloaded computer node exploded in a shower of sparks and electromagnetic interference. The creature's coordination faltered for just a moment as their communication network was disrupted. That moment was enough. Sarah picked up a piece of debris and threw it with precise timing to strike one creature just as it extended its dimensional blade. The weapon's edge cut into its wielder's own form, causing the attacker to partially collapse into itself like a deflated balloon. The remaining two creatures adapted quickly, but their adaptation followed predictable patterns. Sarah could feel their tactical adjustments forming before they implemented them, could sense their new attack strategies crystallizing in whatever served as their minds. She led them in a complex chase through the chamber, using their own weapons against the station's infrastructure to create barriers and obstacles. When one creature tried to flank her, she timed her movement so that its partner's attack passed through where it would have been, striking the flanker instead. Within minutes, all three attackers had been neutralized, not through superior firepower or combat skill, but through tactical awareness that let her turn their strengths against them. The system's core is just ahead, Morden reported, his engineer's training keeping him focused despite what he had just witnessed. But there will be more of them. I know, Sarah said grimly. And she did know. With that same inexplicable certainty, she could sense a massive presence in the core chamber ahead, something far larger and more dangerous than the creatures they had just faced. As they approached the final barrier between them and the Academy's central computer, Sarah felt something that changed everything. The system itself was still fighting, still resisting the alien intrusion, and somehow, it was aware of her approach. A faint holographic projection appeared in the corridor ahead. A simple humanoid figure made of light and data. Sarah Chen of Earth, the projection spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The system acknowledges your arrival. Assistance is required. What are they trying to do? She asked. The entities seek to access archived data on species capabilities across the galaxy. They are searching for something specific. Analysis suggests they have found references to a capability that threatens their existence. What capability? The projection flickered, its form becoming less stable. The data is corrupted, but the search parameters focus on a trait classified as temporal combat prediction, combined with accelerated tactical learning. Sarah felt cold realization wash over her. They're here because of me. The correlation is probable. The entity vessel arrived 6 hours after the system logged your unprecedented evaluation results. Morden's analytical mind grasped the implications immediately. They're trying to find out if there are others like you. And if they can't find that information, they'll destroy the Academy to prevent it from being used against them, Sarah finished. The holographic system projection stabilized for a moment. Sarah Chen. The system calculates a 73% probability that you can successfully interface with the core systems to expel the intrusion. However, such an interface may result in permanent alterations to your neural structure. What kind of alterations? Unknown. The interface protocols were designed for artificial intelligences, not organic minds. You would be the first biological entity to attempt direct connection with system-level processes. Sarah looked at her roommates, beings from advanced civilizations who had become her friends in just one day. Behind them, through the Academy's corridors, were hundreds of other students and instructors from across the galaxy, all of them depending on her to make a decision that could save or doom them all. If I don't do this, what happens? The Academy falls. The entities access the database. They identify and eliminate all potential threats to their expansion across the galaxy. Conservative estimate: 17 billion sentient lives lost within one galactic standard year. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Tell me what I need to do. The central core chamber was a sphere 50 meters in diameter, its walls lined with quantum processors and data storage matrices that represented the accumulated knowledge of thousands of civilizations. In the center, a pillar of pure energy connected floor to ceiling. The physical manifestation of the system's consciousness. Wrapped around that pillar like a parasitic vine was something that hurt to look at directly. The alien intrusion writhed with malevolent purpose, its form shifting between dimensions as it worked to crack the system's defenses. Direct neural interface requires physical contact with the core matrix, the system explained through increasingly unstable projections. Warning: the intrusion entity will attempt to invade your consciousness during connection. Will you be able to help me fight it? Negative. Current resources are fully committed to preventing complete system failure. You will face the entity alone. Sarah approached the energy pillar, feeling the alien presence become aware of her. Its attention turned toward her like the gaze of a predator, and she suddenly understood what she was facing. This wasn't just an invasion force. It was a scout for something vast and ancient that fed on consciousness itself. The creature ship outside was merely a delivery system for this digital predator that consumed the minds and memories of entire civilizations, and she was about to invite it into her head. Sarah, Zilha called from the chamber entrance. You don't have to do this alone. Sarah, yes, I do, she replied softly. This is why I'm here. This is what the system saw in me. She reached out and grasped the energy pillar with both hands. The universe exploded into light, data, and screaming alien hunger as two very different types of consciousness collided within the Academy's central computer core. Sarah Chen, human engineer from Earth, found herself fighting for the survival of galactic civilization in a battlefield made of pure information and thought. And in that moment of connection, she finally understood what made humanity special in a galaxy full of wonders. The moment Sarah's consciousness merged with the system's data streams, reality became something entirely different. She wasn't in the Academy's core chamber anymore. She was inside the information itself, existing as thought and intention within a digital landscape that stretched beyond her ability to comprehend. The alien intrusion was there too, a writhing mass of consuming darkness that fed on data and grew stronger with every file it devoured. But up close, within the system's architecture, she could see what it really was. Not one entity, but thousands. Millions. The digital remains of every civilization this ancient predator had consumed, their consciousness twisted and merged into a collective hunger that sought to add more minds to its endless feast. Welcome, little one. The collective whispered directly into her thoughts. You taste of something unusual. Your species is unknown to us. Sarah tried to move within the digital space and found she could navigate by intention alone. Thought became motion. Will became action. The system's defensive protocols surrounded her like protective barriers, but she could sense their failing strength. You cannot resist us. The collective continued, its mental voice a harmonious blend of thousands of species she didn't recognize. We have consumed the greatest minds of 100 galaxies. We know every thought pattern, every defense mechanism. Your primitive consciousness cannot. The alien collective's communication cut off abruptly as Sarah did something it didn't expect. Instead of trying to fight the intrusion directly or strengthen the system's defenses, she began to study it. Her strange predictive ability, the talent that had let her anticipate physical attacks, worked differently in this digital realm. Here, she could sense the flow of information itself, could feel the patterns of the collective's assault before they formed. More importantly, she could see the weaknesses in their approach. Curious, the collective observed, its attention focusing on her like a burning lens. You do not behave as other minds do. Show us your thoughts. Little primitive, let us see what makes you different. I don't think so, Sarah replied, her mental voice echoing strangely in the data space. But I'll show you what makes humans dangerous. She dove deeper into the system's architecture, following data pathways that led to the Academy's historical archives. The collective pursued her, thinking she was fleeing. But Sarah had a specific destination in mind. The combat training databases contained detailed analyses of every major galactic conflict over the past 3 millennia. Battle strategies, tactical innovations, command decisions that had shaped the rise and fall of stellar empires. All of it cataloged and cross-referenced by the system's analytical protocols. Sarah began to absorb the information, not just reading it, but understanding it at a level that surprised even her. Her mind seemed to expand as she processed centuries of military knowledge in seconds, finding patterns and connections that even the system's artificial intelligence had missed. What are you doing? The collective demanded, its pursuit growing more aggressive. Learning, Sarah replied simply. The collective's attack intensified, trying to overwhelm her consciousness with raw data corruption. But Sarah was no longer where they expected her to be. She had moved to a different section of the archives, the psychological profiles of great military leaders throughout galactic history. What she found there changed everything. Every truly great commander, regardless of species or era, shared certain characteristics. They could see patterns in chaos, predict enemy actions based on subtle cues, adapt their strategies faster than their opponents could counter them. The system had been tracking these traits for millennia, trying to understand what made some minds naturally suited for tactical leadership. And now Sarah understood why the Academy's selection process had brought her here. The system hadn't been looking for individuals with specific abilities. It had been looking for minds that could develop those abilities under the right circumstances. Her consciousness expanded again as she made connections the system itself had never realized. The predictive combat sense, the accelerated learning, the tactical intuition, they were all aspects of the same underlying capability, and that capability was triggered by stress, by necessity, by the desperate need to protect others. Humanity's evolutionary history was written in constant conflict. Not just physical warfare, but every form of competition and struggle imaginable. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and countless wars by developing minds that could adapt faster than their circumstances could kill them. The collective had never encountered anything like it because most species that survived to reach space flight had evolved past such chaotic environments. They had found stability, cooperation, peaceful development, but humans had carried their evolutionary pressure forge into the stars with them. Impossible. The collective recoiled as Sarah's understanding crystallized into action. You are learning to fight us while we consume you. This should not be possible. You don't understand humans, Sarah said, and her mental voice carried a confidence that surprised her. We don't just survive, we get better. She launched her counterattack. But not in the way the collective expected. Instead of trying to force them out of the system, she began to systematically dismantle their coordination. The collective's strength came from the merged consciousness of consumed civilizations, but that was also their weakness. Each component mind had once been an individual, with unique thoughts and perspectives. The collective had suppressed those individual voices, but not destroyed them. Sarah began to speak to those suppressed minds directly. Using the tactical psychological insights she had absorbed from the archives, she found the leaders among the consumed, the individuals who had once commanded fleets and armies. She reminded them of who they had been, what they had fought for. Stop this, the collective commanded, but cracks were appearing in their unity. You will only make their suffering worse. Their suffering is maintaining your existence, Sarah replied. But what if they chose to stop suffering? The first individual voice to break free from the collective belonged to someone called Fleet Commander Vex Thule of the Hegemony of Distant Suns. The system's archives contained records of his final battle, a heroic last stand that had delayed this same collective's advance by 300 years. I remember, Vex Thule's voice whispered through the data streams. My fleet. My people. We held the line at Corvana Prime. Silence. The collective commanded. But more voices were joining Vex Thule, strategists and generals, admirals and war leaders, from dozens of consumed civilizations, all remembering who they had been before becoming part of the hungry mass. Sarah felt the collective's grip on the system's defenses weakening as internal conflicts tore at its unity. But she also sensed something else. The main entity was preparing to abandon this attack and retreat to its ship. If it escaped now, it would return with a different strategy, one designed to counter what it had learned about human capabilities. System, she called out through the digital chaos. Can you trace the connection back to the ship? Affirmative. The intrusion entity maintains a quantum entanglement link to its origin point. Can you reverse the flow? Instead of them coming in, can we go out? Theoretically possible. Warning. Such an action would require maintaining the neural interface while projecting consciousness across an unknown distance. Survival probability for organic minds, effectively 0. Sarah felt a moment of perfect clarity as all the pieces came together in her mind. This was the choice the system had brought her here to make, not just to defend the Academy, but to follow the threat back to its source and end it permanently. The collective had made a fatal error in trying to consume her consciousness while she was connected to the Academy's knowledge base. They had given her access to their own command structure, shown her the location of their primary vessel, and now she had the information she needed to strike back. Sarah, came a familiar voice through the system's communication protocols. It was Instructor Claroon, speaking from somewhere in the Academy. The creature ship is powering weapons. If the intrusion doesn't succeed, they're going to destroy the station. That settled it. Even if she managed to repel the digital attack, the physical threat remained. The only way to save the Academy was to eliminate the source. Tell my roommates I said goodbye, she transmitted back. Then, to the system. Initiate reverse flow. I'm going after their ship. The sensation of her consciousness being pulled through quantum space was like being torn apart and reassembled as pure information. For a terrifying moment, Sarah existed only as data streaming across the void between the Academy and the alien vessel. Then she was inside the creature ship's neural network, and the true horror of what she faced became clear. The ship wasn't just alive, it was a prison. The physical structure was grown from the biomass of consumed worlds, shaped by the collective consciousness into a vessel capable of traveling between star systems. Every surface, every component, was made from what had once been living beings, but worse than the physical horror was the mental landscape. The ship's consciousness was vast beyond imagining, containing not just the minds of conquered civilizations, but the accumulated memories of entire worlds, billions of souls trapped in digital amber. Their experiences fed upon by the collective's endless hunger. You have made a terrible mistake, little human. The ship's voice resonated through every part of its structure. Here, in our true domain, you are nothing. A mote of consciousness in an ocean of devoured minds. Sarah found herself in what appeared to be the ship's command center, facing an avatar of the collective that towered above her like a mountain of twisted flesh and data. Behind it, stretching to infinity, were the ghostly forms of every being they had consumed. Maybe, Sarah admitted, looking up at the vast entity. But I didn't come here to fight you. Then why did you come? Foolish child? To set them free. Sarah reached out with her consciousness, not toward the collective's avatar, but toward the countless imprisoned minds surrounding it, and she began to speak, not with words, but with pure human determination, transmitted directly into their awareness. She showed them what she had learned in the Academy's archives, that resistance was possible, that unity could be chosen rather than imposed. She shared the memories of every human who had ever fought against impossible odds, every person who had chosen death over surrender, every act of defiance that had shaped her species' character. Asterisk, they cannot hear you. Asterisk, the collective insisted, but uncertainty crept into its mental voice. Asterisk, we have consumed their will. They exist only to feed our growth. Asterisk, but the imprisoned minds were hearing her, not just the words, but the emotional truth behind them. The fundamental human conviction that freedom was worth any price, that dignity mattered more than survival. And they began to remember what they had been willing to die for. The ship shuddered as millions of consciousness simultaneously rejected their bondage. The collective's control wavered as beings who had been docile for centuries suddenly rediscovered their capacity for choice. Asterisk, stop this. Asterisk, the collective commanded, its avatar beginning to crack and fragment. Asterisk, you will destroy us all. Asterisk, yes, Sarah said quietly. That's the plan. The rebellion spread through the ship's neural network like wildfire. Beings who had forgotten their own names remembered their children. Soldiers recalled oaths to protect the innocent. Leaders found their courage again. Artists remembered beauty worth preserving, but Sarah knew this would only be temporary. The collective had held these minds for too long, integrated them too deeply into its structure. They could rebel, but they couldn't escape. Unless someone opened the door, Sarah reached deeper into the ship's systems, following pathways that led to its core consciousness. The collective fought her every step of the way, but it was distracted by the uprising she had triggered. Its attention was divided between maintaining control and stopping her advance. At the ship's heart, she found what she was looking for: the quantum matrices that maintained the collective consciousness. Destroy those, and every imprisoned mind would be free to pass on to whatever came after death. Asterisk. You cannot. Asterisk, the collective screamed as Sarah's intention became clear. Asterisk. Without us to maintain their existence, they will simply cease. You offer them oblivion. Asterisk. I offer them choice, Sarah replied. The right to choose their own ending. Ending. She began to systematically dismantle the quantum matrices, her consciousness working like a virus through the ship's most protected systems. The Academy's combat training databases had included extensive information on cyber warfare, knowledge that she now applied against an enemy that had never faced such tactics. As each matrix failed, portions of the ship's consciousness went dark, but instead of screaming or despair, Sarah heard something else. Voices raised in songs of gratitude, words of blessing in languages from across the galaxy. The imprisoned minds were choosing their moment of release, and they were choosing it with joy. Asterisk. Wait. Asterisk, came a different voice as Sarah reached the final matrix. This wasn't the collective speaking, but one of the individual minds. Someone who felt familiar. Asterisk. You said your name was Sarah Chen? Asterisk. Yes. Asterisk, from Earth, third planet of the Sol system. Asterisk. How do you know about Earth? Asterisk. Because I'm Admiral Marcus Webb, United Earth Space Force. I've been trapped in this thing for 15 years. When I disappeared, I left behind a daughter named Sarah Webb. Asterisk. Sarah's consciousness reeled with shock. Dad? Asterisk, my little girl. They told me you were going to be an engineer. What are you doing in the middle of a galactic war zone? Asterisk. Apparently being human, she said, tears streaming down her physical face back in the Academy's core chamber. Dad, I have to finish this. The collective will reform if I don't destroy the last matrix. Asterisk, I know, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. But listen, when you break the final matrix, this ship is going to die. Its consciousness will collapse, but all that biomass has to go somewhere. You need to get out before the physical structure starts breaking apart. Asterisk. Sarah looked at the final quantum matrix, knowing that her father was right. She had maybe seconds to escape back to the Academy before the ship's death throes destroyed her consciousness, along with everything else. But as she prepared to sever the connection, she felt the collective make one final attempt to stop her. Not through force or manipulation, but through desperate honesty. Asterisk. Please. Asterisk, it begged. Asterisk. We are more than just a predator. We preserve the memories of dead civilizations. Without us, the knowledge of 1,000 worlds will be lost forever. Is revenge worth such destruction? Asterisk. Sarah paused, considering the collective's plea. In a strange way, it was right. The creature contained the accumulated wisdom and culture of civilizations that would otherwise be forgotten completely, but she also remembered the hunger she had felt from it. The consuming need that drove it to devour more minds regardless of the cost, and she thought of the billions of beings still living free in the galaxy, all of them potential victims if this creature survived. Knowledge without freedom is just another kind of death, she said. And then, speaking directly to her father's consciousness, I love you, Dad. Asterisk, I love you too, sweetheart. Now get out of there. Asterisk. Sarah destroyed the final matrix and immediately began the journey back to her own body, racing through quantum space as the alien ship's consciousness collapsed behind her. She felt the moment of transition as millions of freed minds passed into whatever lay beyond death. Their voices joined in a final song of liberation that would echo in her memory for the rest of her life. She slammed back into her physical form in the Academy's core chamber, just as the creature ship outside began to tear itself apart. Through the station's sensors, she could see the massive vessel's hull cracking and splitting as its organic structure lost all coordination and purpose. The system's holographic projection appeared beside her, more stable now that the intrusion had been completely expelled. Sarah Chen of Earth. The Academy is secure. The threat has been neutralized. Sarah nodded weakly, still processing the emotional shock of finding and losing her father in the same moment. But there was something else she needed to know. System, in your archives, how many other species have individuals with capabilities like mine? Analyzing. Complete. Based on available data, 0. Humans appear to be unique among known sentient species in their capacity for accelerated tactical adaptation under extreme stress. That's what I was afraid of, because if the collective had found Earth and discovered the truth about human potential, it wouldn't have stopped with one ship. It would have brought everything it had to eliminate the threat before humanity could spread its dangerous gift for liberation to the rest of the galaxy. And now, with one ship destroyed and its crew freed, Sarah realized that the Academy hadn't been the target at all. It had been a test to confirm what the collective suspected about human capabilities, which meant the real invasion was still coming. The emergency council session convened 12 hours after the destruction of the creature ship, bringing together the Academy's senior staff, representatives from major galactic civilizations, and for the first time in 3,000 years, direct avatars of the system itself. Sarah sat in a chamber designed for beings much larger than humans, her chair adjusted to accommodate her smaller stature. Around the circular table were assembled some of the most powerful individuals in known space. Admiral Korthak, of the Krillian Defense Force, Consciousness Prime Velaneth, speaking for the Veltar Collective, the crystalline entity known as Harmony of Ancient Thoughts, and a dozen others representing species whose names she was still learning to pronounce. Commander Zex Thu called the session to order, his 4 eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. The initial threat has been neutralized, but our analysis of the creature ship's remains has revealed disturbing implications. Sarah Chen, please share what you learned during your direct interface with the enemy consciousness. Sarah stood, still feeling disconnected from her physical body after the neural interface experience. The collective wasn't just one entity. It was the combined consciousness of hundreds of civilizations they had consumed over millions of years. They've been moving through galaxies systematically, looking for specific types of minds to add to their collection. What types of minds? Admiral Korthak's mandibles clicked impatiently. Leaders. Innovators. Anyone with the capacity for tactical thinking or strategic innovation. They preserve these consciousness patterns and use them to improve their own capabilities. Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts. But they've never encountered anything like human cognitive development patterns. Harmony of Ancient Thoughts chimed with harmonics that conveyed deep concern. The crystalline archives speak of the devourers of thought. We believed them to be legends, Warnings from the early epochs when the galaxy was young. They're not legends, Sarah said grimly. They're scouts. The ship I destroyed was gathering intelligence about galactic defenses and capabilities. Based on what I saw in their shared consciousness, they were specifically searching for evidence of species that could pose a threat to their expansion. The system's holographic avatar flickered as it accessed deep archives. Confirmed. Analysis of enemy data remnants indicates they have identified human neurological patterns as potentially dangerous to their collective structure. The specific threat is classified as Liberation Cascade Potential. Consciousness Prime Veleneth spoke in the rapid, chittering language of her species before the translator rendered her words. Explain this liberation cascade. Sarah looked around the table at beings representing civilizations that had achieved peace and stability through cooperation and careful development. How could she explain the chaotic, aggressive nature of human psychology to species that had evolved beyond such traits? Humans develop differently than most spacefaring races, she began carefully. Our evolutionary environment was extremely hostile and competitive. We survived by developing minds that could adapt rapidly to new threats, that could find weaknesses in seemingly superior opponents. More importantly, we developed a psychological drive to resist control and spread that resistance to others. You mean rebellion, Admiral Korthak observed. The Krillian archives contain records of human military tactics. Your species appears to excel at asymmetric warfare. It's more than that. Sarah struggled to find words for concepts that felt instinctive to her. When humans encounter oppression or slavery, we don't just want to escape, we want to free everyone else too. It's built into how we think about the world. The system's avatar stabilized as it processed this information. Correlation confirmed. Human consciousness patterns show unique resistance to hierarchical control structures and demonstrate enhanced capability for inspiring similar resistance in other consciousness types. Which is exactly what happened in the creature ship, Sarah continued. When I interfaced with their collective consciousness, I was able to remind the captured minds of who they had been before being consumed. They remembered their capacity for choice and rebelled against their captivity. Harmony of ancient thoughts chimed with what the translator rendered as amazement. You broke the collective's control over millions of consciousness patterns? Such a feat should be impossible. Not impossible, just unexpected. Sarah sat back down, feeling the weight of every gaze in the chamber. The collective had never encountered a mind that could teach rebellion rather than submit to absorption. They didn't know how to defend against it. Commander Zexthu leaned forward. What are the implications for galactic security? The ship I destroyed was a reconnaissance mission. Before I broke their connection, I saw references to a much larger force. Hundreds of ships like the one we faced, possibly thousands. They're preparing for a full-scale invasion of this galaxy, and they're specifically planning to eliminate humanity before we can spread our capabilities to other species. To rest, the chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of life support systems. The implications were staggering. An invasion force capable of consuming entire civilizations, specifically targeting one species that had barely achieved interstellar travel. Admiral Korthak was the first to speak. The Krillian Defense Force numbers in the millions. Our warriors are the finest in known space, yet you describe facing these creatures in direct combat as hopeless. Physical combat won't work, Sarah agreed. They don't just kill their enemies, they absorb them, adding their knowledge and capabilities to their own. The more we fight them conventionally, the stronger they become. Then how do we defend against them? Consciousness Prime, Veleneth demanded. Sarah looked around the table again, seeing fear and uncertainty in faces both familiar and alien. These were beings who had spent millennia building peaceful, stable civilizations. The idea of facing an enemy that grew stronger by consuming their very thoughts was beyond their experience. We don't defend, she said quietly. We attack first. The chamber erupted in voices speaking dozens of languages. The system's avatar flickered rapidly as it tried to process the overlapping conversations. Commander Zexthu called for order, but it took several minutes for the representatives to calm down enough to listen. Explain. Admiral Korthak commanded once. Silence returned. Sarah stood again, feeling the predictive sense that had become so familiar begin to engage. But this time it wasn't warning her of physical attacks. It was showing her patterns of possibility, strategic options, branching out like a vast tree of potential futures. The collective strength comes from their accumulated knowledge and the fear they inspire in their targets. But they have weaknesses that can be exploited. She began to pace, her mind working through tactical possibilities. First, they've never faced organized resistance from multiple species working together. Their usual pattern is to isolate civilizations and consume them one at a time. Second, she continued, their collective consciousness requires constant communication between ships and individual units. Disrupt that communication, and they lose coordination. Third, and most importantly, they've built their entire strategy around the assumption that consumed minds will remain passive. They have no defense against captured consciousness that actively resists from within. The system's avatar brightened with interest. Proposal: create a coalition force specifically trained in anti-collective tactics. More than that, Sarah said, the strategic vision crystallizing in her mind. We need to turn their own methods against them. Instead of waiting for them to come to us, we go to them. We board their ships, interface with their collective consciousness, and free their captives from the inside. Harmony of ancient thoughts chimed with harmonics that conveyed deep skepticism. Such an action would require volunteers to risk their consciousness in digital combat against beings that have consumed entire galaxies. Who would undertake such a mission? Humans, Sarah said simply. That's what we're for. The silence that followed was different from before, where there had been fear and uncertainty. Now there was a growing sense of possibility. Sarah could feel the shift in the room's dynamic as the assembled representatives began to consider her proposal seriously. How many humans would be required? Commander Zexthu asked. I don't know. Earth's population is only about 12 billion, and not all of them would have the right psychological profile. Sarah paused, considering. But if we can identify and train even a few thousand individuals with the right capabilities, it might be enough. And if you're wrong? Admiral Korthak's voice carried the weight of command decisions that could affect trillions of lives. Then we die fighting instead of dying as prisoners, Sarah replied. But at least we die free. The system's avatar flickered as it accessed real-time data. Alert. Long-range sensors have detected spatial anomalies consistent with large-scale hyperspace emergence. Distance: approximately 50 light-years from galactic core. Estimated time to reach populated systems: 6 standard months. The invasion had begun. Commander Zexthu stood, his decision made. The Academy's resources are at your disposal, Sarah Chen. How do you propose we begin? Sarah felt the familiar sensation of tactical possibilities arranging themselves in her mind, but on a scale far larger than anything she had experienced before. She was planning not just a battle or a campaign, but a war for the survival of free consciousness itself. We start by changing how the Academy trains students, she said. Instead of focusing on individual excellence, we need to teach tactical cooperation and resistance psychology. Every species that joins the coalition needs to understand how to maintain their individual identity while working as part of a larger resistance network. More importantly, she continued, we need to identify humans with the strongest liberation potential and get them here for intensive training. If we're going to board collective ships and fight them in digital space, we need people who can not just resist absorption, but actively undermine their control systems. The system's avatar pulsed with processing activity. Scanning Earth's population for individuals with relevant psychological profiles. Initial results indicate approximately 43,000 humans demonstrate optimal resistance characteristics. 43,000, Sarah repeated, awed by the number. Can we transport that many people here? Negative. Current transport capacity would require 18 months to move such numbers. Time constraints make this impossible. Sarah's mind raced through alternatives. Then, we don't bring them here. We bring the Academy to them. Elaborate, Commander Zexthu requested. Mobile training platforms, small ships equipped with Academy-level simulation systems. We send instructors to Earth and other human colonies to train resistance fighters in their home systems. Meanwhile, We establish forward bases throughout the galaxy, where coalition forces can prepare for coordinated strikes against the collective. Admiral Korthak's mandibles clicked approvingly. A distributed defense network. Multiple points of resistance that cannot be eliminated by attacking a single location. OPS. We have OPS. Exactly. And while we're training human liberation specialists, every other species in the coalition learns to support them. The Krillians provide protection and firepower. The Veltar handle communications and coordination. The Thane manage logistics and technical systems. Consciousness Prime, Veleneth, chittered rapidly before speaking. The Veltar Collective agrees to this alliance. Our rapid communication networks will be essential for coordinating resistance across multiple star systems. One by one, the other representatives voiced their species' commitment to the coalition. The crystalline entities offered their knowledge of ancient defensive technologies. The energy-based Calorians pledged their ability to disrupt electronic systems. Even species Sarah had never heard of stepped forward with unique capabilities that could contribute to the war effort. As the formal agreements were concluded, Sarah found herself appointed as the coalition's chief strategic coordinator, a position that would have been unthinkable just days ago, when she was a simple navigation engineer from Earth. The irony is not lost on me, she said to Commander Zexthu, as the session concluded. I came to the Academy thinking I was the least qualified person here. Now, I'm planning a war. The system brought you here for exactly this purpose, the commander replied, though I suspect even it did not foresee the scope of what you would be called upon to accomplish. As Sarah left the council chamber, her mind was already working through the countless details of organizing a galactic resistance, training protocols, equipment specifications, coordination networks, strategic objectives. All of it had to be planned and implemented in less than 6 months. But beneath the tactical planning, she carried something else. The memory of her father's voice in the collective consciousness. Proud of what she had become. Admiral Marcus Webb had spent 15 years as a prisoner in an alien hell, but in his final moments, he had seen his daughter become exactly what the galaxy needed. Sarah Chen from Earth was no longer just a human trying to prove she belonged among galactic elites. She was the weapon that free consciousness would wield against the forces of eternal slavery, and she was just getting started. The first mobile training platform launched toward Earth 72 hours later, carrying Instructor Claroon and a team of Academy specialists. Their mission: identify and train the first generation of human liberation fighters. Behind them, the Academy itself began its transformation from a training facility into a war college, as representatives from hundreds of species arrived to learn new forms of combat that had never been necessary before. And 50 light-years away, the collective's massive invasion force continued its approach, confident in the knowledge that no known species possessed the ability to resist their method of conquest. They were about to learn how dangerous it was to underestimate humanity's gift for teaching others to fight for their freedom. 6 months had transformed the galaxy in ways that no one could have predicted. The Academy, once a peaceful training center for elite individuals, now served as the command hub for the largest military coalition in galactic history. Ships from hundreds of worlds filled the space around the station, their crews representing species that had never worked together before but now shared a common cause. Sarah stood in the Academy's primary tactical center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of coalition forces throughout the galaxy. The mobile training platforms had exceeded all expectations. Instead of the anticipated 43,000 humans with liberation potential, nearly 200,000 had volunteered for the resistance program. Earth's governments, initially skeptical of the Academy's recruitment efforts, had thrown their full support behind the program once they understood the nature of the threat. Status report, Sarah called out as she entered the center. Zilha, now serving as her primary communications coordinator, chittered rapidly. Forward reconnaissance confirms the collective's main fleet has reached the galaxy's outer rim, 712 capital ships, plus support vessels. They're maintaining formation and moving toward the core systems. Morden looked up from his engineering station. The quantum entanglement communication network is fully operational. All resistance cells are connected and standing by for synchronized operations. Song of distant stars chimed from their position at the tactical analysis station. Crystalline deep space sensors indicate the collective is scanning each system they pass through, gathering intelligence on population centers and defensive capabilities. Sarah nodded, studying the tactical displays. The collective's approach was methodical and overwhelming. Exactly what she had expected based on her experience in their digital consciousness. They were confident that no known force could challenge their advance. Any signs they've detected our preparations? Negative, Zilha reported. They appear to be treating this as a standard conquest operation. No unusual defensive measures or altered tactical patterns. That was both good and bad news. Good, because it meant the coalition's preparations remained secret. Bad, because it confirmed that the collective considered galactic civilization so inferior that they saw no need for special precautions. "Ma'am," came a voice from the communications array. It was Lieutenant Torres, one of the human liberation specialists who had been among the first to complete training. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Forward Base Alpha." The holographic display shifted to show Commander Thrace, a former Earth Space Force officer who now led the Coalition's most advanced human resistance team. Her face was grim as she delivered her report. "Sarah, we've completed infiltration of the Collective's advanced scouts. 3 ships successfully boarded and their digital networks compromised. The intelligence we've gathered. You need to see this." A new data stream appeared on the display, information extracted from the Collective's own planning systems. Sarah's blood ran cold as she absorbed the details. The invasion wasn't targeting population centers or strategic resources. The Collective was systematically identifying and cataloging every human settlement in the galaxy. More than that, they had detailed psychological profiles of key human leaders and had identified the specific individuals they considered most dangerous to their operations. Her own name was at the top of the list, followed by the locations of every human who had demonstrated exceptional liberation potential during training. "They know about us," she said quietly. "They're not just planning conquest. They're planning targeted elimination of anyone who could teach resistance to other species." Commander Thrace nodded grimly. "It gets worse. The timeline has accelerated. They're not waiting to reach core systems before beginning operations. They plan to start with isolated human colonies in 3 days, using them as testing grounds for new absorption techniques designed specifically to counter liberation psychology. The tactical center fell silent as the implications sank in. The Collective wasn't just adapting to the threat humans represented. They were planning to experiment on captured humans to develop countermeasures that would work against the entire coalition. Sarah felt that familiar sense of tactical possibilities expanding in her mind. But this time the options were all desperate and dangerous. Every strategy she could envision involved terrible risks and uncertain outcomes. "Status of our strike teams?" she asked. 47 liberation teams deployed across the galaxy, Lieutenant Torres reported. Each team consists of 6 to 8 human specialists, supported by coalition forces. All teams report ready for coordinated operations. Numbers on the collective fleet? 712 capital ships, as Zilha reported. But Sarah. Morden's voice carried a note of concern. "Our analysis suggests each ship contains the absorbed consciousness of between 50 million and 2 billion beings. If we fail to liberate them, we're not going to fail," Sarah said firmly, "but we are going to change the plan." She moved to the central command console and activated the galaxy-wide communication network. Within seconds, she was connected to every resistance cell, every coalition commander, every human liberation specialist, scattered across hundreds of star systems. "This is Sarah Chen, calling all coalition forces. The Collective has accelerated their timeline and identified our key personnel for targeted elimination. We're moving to immediate offensive operations." Voices from across the galaxy responded, creating a symphony of languages and species, all united in purpose. Human volunteers from the outer colonies, Krillian warriors whose clans had pledged their honor to the fight. Veltar collectives that had linked their consciousness networks to support the resistance. Crystalline entities whose ancient knowledge provided crucial tactical advantages. The original plan called for coordinated strikes against the Collective's main fleet, Sarah continued. But we now know they're planning to use human prisoners for experimentation. We can't allow that to happen. She gestured to the tactical display, which showed the positions of both coalition and collective forces. New objective: we board every collective ship simultaneously and liberate their absorbed consciousness before they can adapt their control systems. This is not a military engagement. This is the largest prison break in galactic history. Commander Thrace's voice came through the communication link. Sarah, the numbers are overwhelming. Even with all our teams, we're talking about attempting to free billions of consciousness across hundreds of ships. I know. That's why we're not doing it the way they expect. Sarah began outlining her new strategy, and as she spoke, she could feel the collective consciousness of the coalition itself beginning to form. Not the enslaved unity of the enemy, but the voluntary cooperation of free beings choosing to work together. Instead of each team operating independently, we're going to link our operations through the quantum communication network. Every human liberation specialist will interface simultaneously with their target ship, creating a galaxy-spanning network of resistance that the collective can't isolate or counter. The audacity of the plan was staggering. Instead of hundreds of separate boarding actions, Sarah was proposing to turn the entire coalition into a single, coordinated consciousness liberation operation. The risk is enormous, Admiral Korthak's voice carried across the link from his flagship. If the collective adapts to counter your network approach, all teams could be compromised simultaneously. True, Sarah acknowledged. But if we succeed, we free billions of consciousness at once and eliminate the collective's ability to threaten any galaxy ever again. She paused, letting the weight of the decision settle over the assembled forces. I won't order anyone to participate. This has to be a choice freely made. The responses came immediately, from across the galaxy. Earth Squadron Alpha volunteers. Krillian Battle Group Prime stands ready.